lived on the curve, Harlow Miller. And he was a big promoter of Monmouth College.
Right.
In fact, I think Earlville had about the third most kids at Monmouth at one point.
A lot of them went there.
Chicago was first, Monmouth was second, Earlville was third. We had a lot of, well, there was 5 of us, I think, out of my class. Linda Cole went, Dean and Gib Malloy went, I went, John Defoe went. And then I think for a while, Bud Swayze was there for a year. And then there was some other people from Earlville that went to Rollo, actually, but they had Earlville address.
Right.
I was going to be a chemistry major, and after 1 year up there in rotten egg gas, hydrogen sulfide, and I kept looking, it was the second floor of the science building. I looked down at the geology class, going out, getting in their cars, nice sunny day, going out on a field trip. They also had some pretty good looking gals. I had a pretty good looking gal for a partner in the lab, the chemistry lab, but most of them were pretty brainy, but short on looks. I decided that where I belonged really is to, I was going to go back and farm anyway, and geology's got a little bit. Mama didn't have an ag course.
Right. So
I went down and asked Donald Wills, the professor, if I could change majors and come down to geology, and he said, "Love to have you, come on down." So the next year I signed up for a bunch of geology classes, and I hadn't probably been in there for a month or two, and he offered me an assistant lab, a lab assistant job, which paid money. And so I was a sophomore, and the freshman class would come in, and I even graded their papers, but basically would set up the experiments or the rocks, whatever he was looking at. Did that for a couple of years going through school. And I belonged to a fraternity, Alpha Tau Omega. And I washed dishes to pay for my room for the last few years. And I also took over Scott Atherton's job of hauling the garbage from the ATO house and the teak house out to the dump. I paid a little money.
Not that I had to study much. No time to study.
Well, neither one of them jobs took a lot of time. Washing dishes was right at noon hour, dinner time, and so that wasn't too bad.
It worked, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't all that bad. But I like college, and I like Monmouth, and I made a lot of friends out there. Still got keep in touch with quite a few. I had our 50th reunion here a few years ago, and it's amazing how many of the teak, or not teaks, but the Greek society. Monmouth kind of done away with the fraternities and sororities, but now they're bringing them back.
Oh, really?
And I told the president when I was out there, I said that was really a mistake they made, because for everybody that come back for that reunion, we're Greek. And we were about 70% Greek when I was out there. Everybody belonged to a fraternity or sorority, almost.
Mm-hmm.
But, after college, I got out of college in 1961, and came home, and things hadn't changed a whole lot at home. I think Dad had got the other 80. But anyway, and he'd sold all the hogs, that was the other thing. I played a little basketball in Monmouth too. And one year, the first year when I was playing, I looked up in the grandstand, and Mother was waving, and Dad was sitting there, and I thought to myself, who's milking the cows? Because we never went anywhere. I mean, we had to go up to his brothers up in Milwaukee to weddings, and we came home. And it just never stayed overnight anywhere. And
the life of a milker.
yeah. So anyway, I couldn't hardly wait to get the game over with to go find out who was milking the cows. And he said, I sold them all. I should have done it 10 years ago. Well, I gotta agree with that. But I came home and found out I was sixth on the draft. And, I was gonna be drafted in October, November. Because I was 22 years old, single, and
Occupied.
healthy. So it was 2 years in the Army, basically, digging a ditch, or somebody said, why don't you look into the Navy OCS? You become an officer and spend 3 years in there, but and some time in the reserves, but you get to see the world, as they say. So I went down to the recruiter, and yeah, he says, there's no problem. He says, you gotta go take a test and pass your physical. So I did that, and one thing that, believe it or not, I weighed 195 pounds, and I was 5 pounds too heavy. So he told me, he said, well, you just go lose 5 pounds, come back, and he says, you're in the Navy. Well, it was summertime. I had my appendix out. Last about 3 days before the final exams at Monmouth, but I graduated anyway. Never get your appendix back 10, 15 years before that, you'd been dead probably.
Mm-hmm.
But I went down to the ASC office and I measured for the farm program. And all over the South County, measured fields and make sure that the farmers had enough oats planted where there should have been corn. But finally got back in about September or sometime like that. And I wouldn't have figured I was having a lot of fun anyway. And I told him I lost 5 pounds. You want to weigh me? He said, no, I'll take your word for it.
They must have really needed guys for quota that day.
So I was in the Navy. I went out to Newport, Rhode Island, and the bad part of that planning was it was in the wintertime. But nevertheless, on April 5th of '62, I graduated as a naval officer and was stationed in San Diego, California on an LST. I didn't know what an LST was then, although I'd been and visited one and that had come to Ottawa in about 1946. And I remember it well. I just never put it all together until I got on the LST. And then I didn't make a lot of thinking about that till I went to Greece with it. But I was in San Diego for about 6, 8 months. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was up in Seattle, Washington, to the World's Fair. It was just ending up. And we got ordered immediately to go back to San Diego, load up the tanks and the Marines, and head for Cuba. Well, the ship isn't very fast, so by the time we got back to San Diego,
It's all over.
it was all over basically, except that Castro wasn't taking out missiles. He wasn't going to take out the missiles that were in there. So they put 10 LSTs back in commission. And I went by that old rusted hulk, and I told the guy next to me, John Smith was his name, believe it or not, and I said, I sure feel sorry for anybody that gets duty on that thing. He said, boy, you got that right, that's a wreck. Well, that very night, my orders came in from Washington to report aboard B-25 as engineering officer and help put it back in commission and then sail it to Norfolk, Virginia, Little Creek. And that little thing there that I did is what got me 35 years later or more on the project to go get one in Greece. Spent a lot of years in between those. I liked the Navy, I almost stayed in. In fact, I was naive enough to think we'd declare war against North Vietnam and I'd be called back and I was going to stay in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, I met my wife back while I was in the Navy. It was a blind date. Wanda Mooney Cafode was a nurse up in Aurora. And she fixed me up with another nurse. Because John and I run around a lot, but now he's up there all the time dating Wanda, and so I was home on leave and didn't have with everybody else who left town, basically. So I went up there and had a blind date. And my wife said she backed out of that 3 times, but decided to go through with it. And we hit it off our way. We dated 2-3 times. I was only home for a couple of weeks. And then she came, her and her girlfriend came out to Norfolk, visited me. We wrote a lot of letters. And then the next year, the same kind of a deal. I come home and dated her and then went back, and then her and her girlfriend came out there for a couple of days. Well, on one of them trips, I think the 3rd trip back, I bought her a ring in the Navy Exchange, which is pretty reasonable for a diamond. I had it bought, but I wasn't going to give it to her until I got out of the Navy, this was like November. And I was going to get out in April. By 3 years, we would be up in April. Anyway, she's got asking me what my intentions were, and that, we've been going together now for a couple of years, not exactly what you call a whole lot of dates, a lot of letters. I said, well, I bought you a ring, but I don't want to give it to you until I come home. And she said, why not? I want it. So that's kind of how I got proposed to. She probably got another story. But,
So then you re-upped?
no, I didn't re-up. No, I got out in April, came home, and we moved. We could get married in June. We moved it up to May 22nd. I got a Smith Douglas Fertilizer Company, which was at Streeter. Their main office was in Norfolk, and I went over and talked to them over there. And before I got out of the Navy, and then they said, well, you get back, you go to Streeter. Talked to a guy by the name of Roy Brunn down there. And I think there's no doubt we'll hire you. And so that's what I did. When I got home, I went down there and they hired me. And I said, there's only one catch. I'm getting married on the 22nd of May, and I'm going to take a honeymoon for 10 days. They said, no problem. We really don't need you to start too soon anyway, but you get back from your honeymoon June 1st, June 10th, whatever, come on down. So I worked for Smith Douglas from 65 to late 66. And early May, June or so of 65 it's been a year. It's been a year with Smith Douglas. And I went down there. He hadn't given me a raise anyway, but I went down and talked to him, and he finally gave me a raise like he was promised. We changed sales managers, part of the problem. And they hired a coach out of Iowa for $1,000 more. I was making $5,000 in the Navy, and I went to work for $7,000 when I got out. So I felt pretty good about that. But this guy was making $8,000. So I went down, and that was a time when they had froze the increases in wages.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, the only thing we can do is fire you and then rehire you. And I told him, I'd sent my resignation. I said I was going to quit. And, I think I'll go home and get father's operation bigger and something along that line. But I'll train anybody you want to send down for one. Well, when he offered me the job to stay, and I turned him down, he says, well, you're through today. So we'll be down.
Works that way sometimes.
We'll be down to get your car. Well, I learned a valuable lesson. You do not quit a job until you have one. Don't ever do that. And I've never done it since. It works out a lot better that way.
Right.
I went home, told the wife that this was a month before Christmas, that guess what, I'm out of a job. But I was working with a seed corn grower, it's a Funk's grower, and he lives right there at Galesburg. And he liked me, and I went out and told him I wasn't going to be working with Smith Douglas anymore. And he says, I need a sales manager real bad. I said, how about it? I said, what do you pay it? Well, he says, what do you need? And I said, I need at least $8,000, because that's what I was making, or going to make, Smith Douglas. And they sold Smith Douglas fertilizer. And so I worked for them for 7 years, and I kept going back to Smith Douglas on meetings and different things, but I wasn't working for them.
Couldn't get rid of you.
Went through the blade year there, and we went from about 5,000, it's a small guy, went from 5,000 bags of sales to about 12,000. And we never looked back. But then Funk's got a new CEO down there out of Harvard, and he wanted that changed. And the associates had 52% of their business, and he said, why are we fighting DeKalb and Pioneer when all we got to do is take the associates and we'll gain 52%? So I moved on to Golden Harvest because they all quit. The associates quit except Swanson, they didn't. But I didn't see, the kids weren't in school. I said, now's the time to move, and they'd moved me back to Rochelle, which was close to Earlville. Worked for Golden Seed for 7 years. Everything is in sevens in my life, but
It's a lucky number.
yeah. And, I went back and went into a new territory, and I took most of my business away from Swanson Seed Farms on top of that. So I did quite good at Golden Seed Company. And then along about 1980, I decided that I would sell real estate, sell farms. I had a guy at Rochelle that sold farms. I had my real estate license, and then I'd go farm. And Dad got Parkinson's disease in there, and he told me I had to farm his farm or somebody else would, and he wanted me to. So I started helping him, actually in 1973. And then 1980 come along, I took the whole thing over. He still was out there and greased everything and gassed it up and drove tractor, but he didn't want to do any of the buying of seed or selling corn or you know. And I bought the farm on installment. And it went along real good, and I kept went for about a year or two, and then, you know, everything went to pot in 1980. No farms to sell, and we had a government program, and so I went looking for another seed job. I went down to Schisler Seed Company in Elmwood, Illinois, which was another Funk Associates, but they had been pushed out by Funks at that time. And I told them and offered them a deal on strict commission. They only had to pay me for what I sold. And they really liked that idea, and they used my idea to grow their business from about 10,000 bags of corn to 50,000.
Wow.
And their beans went from 75,000 bags of beans to 300,000 bags of beans. Now, the only thing wrong with that was I had shorted myself a little bit, based on the fact that it wasn't just go out and make the sale, which is what the deal was. You ended up getting into deliveries and collections.
I was thinking of that, yeah.
And to do a good job and keep your customers, you know, you wanted to make sure they got the right. Wild Schislers didn't grow corn on, they had a lot of irrigated ground, but one year they didn't, and that was 1989. And it was so dry that they did not have a crop, basically. Well, that was great for them because they didn't have to pay me anything because I didn't sell any corn. And I didn't make any money because I couldn't sell any corn. I didn't have any. So NC Plus, Lincoln, Nebraska, you're all irrigated. big growers, 10th in size in the United States. I and a guy from Streeter went out there one day and we told him we wanted to buy, I had about 40,000 bags of business and he had 50 or 60,000. We wanted to buy 100,000 bags of seed. And they all looked at us like, who are you guys? And we kind of tried to explain to them what had happened, why we needed it. We wanted to buy it wholesale. Well, we did buy it. We did buy quite a bit. They wouldn't sell us that much. But we got enough between the two places that we take care of our dealers. And they hired the guy from Streeter. And that's the only time I had any problems. I went out there the next year he wanted him to hire me. They had a new sales manager again. I don't get along with new sales manager. And he basically turned me down. And then Rich Morse, the guy's name, he went out there and he raised all kinds of cane with him. And then he had a couple of dealers call him up and so forth. Pretty soon I got another call from the guy and he said, would you come back out? I want to reconsider. And I said, well, I got to reconsider and think about it. So I went out there and the secretary saw me and said, I'd been out there interviewed, so she knew me. She said, Bob, she said, we're going to get a hog tank in here and fill it with water because I want to see you walk on the water. And according to Mortz, you walk on water. And I said, well, not that I know of, but anyway. So I worked for them till 1998. And then I was farming. The farm grew up to about 1,000 acres. And that's where I really got ahead. I was full-time job and farming 1,000 acres.
We're running short on tape time here.
Okay.
And I wanted to get to the point where you rescued the LST, or you were rescued, one of the other, I don't know.
Well, some guys wanted an LST back. We'd give them all away. This is 35 years later. Actually, in 1990, I went to Taiwan, looked at LSTs, and that one wouldn't run. 95, the guy down in Pontiac, it was from Seneca, he found one in Greece. And I'd been talking about it for 10 years. Meantime, I had a quad bypass in 95. So we kind of give that up. But anyway, finally, through the red tape, it took 4 years to get it through Congress and give them the ship. And the guys went over there in July, and about 7 of them, and then 20 more, and they were having all kinds of trouble with the guy that was in charge at that point. And they kept saying, you got to get over here, you got to get over here. And I said, I don't know if I can, because it's now close to the 1st of September, and I'm going to count my beans and go. Anyway, I told the wife, I said, I'm going to go over. And if it doesn't run, I'll be home in 4 weeks, and if it runs, I'll be home in 6. There's a guy out there that was in charge was telling me it was 80% ready to sail, and bring the rest of the guys, which it was 72 signed up, but he had 20 and 7 of those guys, 27, and then I was only managed to get 24 to go with me. And when I got over there, was only 13 of the 27 left, because they all left. So I got there and I talked to him about letting me handle the crew in the Navy and the Greeks State Department. And he should go down and get the main engines. Been there 6 weeks and the main engines hadn't been started, or the generators, they didn't have batteries to even start them, or oil, or diesel fuel to start them with. He actually had done nothing. He thought he'd make the Greeks feel sorry for him, and they would come and help him. Well, that wasn't going to work. No foreigner ever feels sorry for an American.
Yeah.
So anyway, but he says, I told him we're going to change gears. I said, you got to start being nice to the Greeks. We need them to help us get this ship going. Oh, he said we can try it. Well, that lasted about a day. come back demanding me to do something, and he said if I didn't do it, he would leave the ship in 5 days. I told him, I'm sorry, Jack, but I'm not going to do it. And so everybody was pretty happy because in 5 days he left the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over and got with the Greeks, and I had some wooden pencils I gave away, and started being nice. And I told the guys to say hi to every Greek they see, no matter where he's at, crosses away from you, or the other side of the street, yell over and say good morning, good afternoon. So we worked on that, and those guys, in spite of everything, you know, the odds were 7-1, we wasn't going to get the ship running when I went over. And I didn't help it evidently because it grew to 27-1. We wouldn't get the ship going. But those guys just got up and worked harder every time the odds went up downtown. And in spite of all the things that went wrong, pretty soon that old girl was running. And we took it out for a sea trial. 5 hours, brought it back, went into the headquarters, said, what I got to do to get the paperwork to leave? And the guy said, we've never done this before, and I don't know. So don't you want to take it out again? And I said, no, I don't want to wear it out.
How many miles is it from Greece to,
It's about 60.
where you go, San Diego?
No, we went to Mobile, Alabama.
Mobile.
About 6,300 miles.
6,300 miles, okay.
And in the meantime, we lost some more guys, and then we gained some guys, and ended up with 30 going out of Suda Bay. And BP Oil gave us 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel, which is a lot of diesel fuel.
Yeah, that was good of them.
And they made that decision in 1 week. And so we sailed over to Athens and got our oil and sailed out of there. And at Sicily, we ran into a big storm, which actually this ship was at Sicily on July 10th, 1943. And it was in a big storm. So it was kind of ironic that now we were in another big storm right at Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
Got through the storm, we lost the starboard engine. As we proceeded out to the Med, we lost 2 generators out of 3. Eventually we lost the steering, we lost the gyro. And we sort of limped into Gibraltar, and we couldn't get registered, so actually we were coming back unregistered, which was a pirate ship. And a pirate ship doesn't have a country, and if you don't have a country, you don't have laws. And if you don't have any laws, you can't break any. That's what the Marine attorney told me. We got in Gibraltar let us in. The other thing is you can't go into any port in the world unless you're a registered ship in some country.
Mm-hmm.
But England never hung up the phone. They said, you got 18 World War II guys on there, and they're welcome in any English port in the world. And they can come by a submarine, a parachute, or old LST. They didn't care.
They're the only ones that help you then.
Well, I don't know, but that's the only. Spain turned us down when they went to Spain. They turned us down. Got in there, and 12 days later, and another 20,000 gallons of VP oil. We left, and there that everybody likes is, they had an article in the paper about when Navy ships come into Gibraltar, they tell the mothers to lock up their daughters. He said, the age of these guys, we're going to tell the daughters to lock up their mothers. So we went out of there, went across the Atlantic, and we lost a piston in one of the engines, but we ran an 911. They were V12s, General Motors 12567 engines, 2-cycle, 900 horse each. And my chief engineer wanted to shut it off. And I said, I want to get home sometime in this century. And so I said, no, I said, I read that book, and it says you can run them on 11 cylinders. He says, yeah, but down there it says don't run it any farther than you have to. And I said, I'm not, Jim. I'm going to run it to Mobile and shut it off. He said, it'll never make it. Well, it did. We had a hole in the bottom developed. We run out of lube oil in the Bahamas, had to go into Nassau. I got another 500 gallons of lube oil. Left there and lost the starboard outside of the Dry Tortugas there, past Key West. I told the girl in Mobile, because she was going to have a welcoming party, and she needed to know what time and what day we're going to be there, what day in particular. And we figured out, and I added 3 days to what I figured. It was the 10th of January 2001. And of course, then she wanted the time we'd be there. Yeah, so how about 10:30 in the morning?
This century.
She said, that'd be great, and hung up. And so we were pushing it to get in there on the 10th of January, and we lost that starboard engine. I had about, 14, 15 hours to the good at that point. And then we slowed up, had a wind on the bow, and it slowed up to about 5 mile an hour, somewhere in that. And lost all that time, was down to an hour, and I told them I was gonna go down and start the main engine. I said, the word got down to the engine room that I was gonna come down. The captain's coming down, he's gonna show you guys how to run this thing. Well, they got the book out and read what they do to start a 12.567. Number 1, check the overspeed trip. And that's that safety switch. If it revs up too high, it shuts the fuel off to the engine, kills it. They hadn't checked it. It wouldn't start. But this guy read the book and he says, no wonder. Went over and it snapped in and he pushed the starter and the starboard started. So we ground our way into Mobile and got in there about 2 o'clock at the sea buoy and got the Coast Guard aboard and the immigration and customs and the agricultural department and who else am I missing? Somebody else. Coast Guard was going to arrest me, they thought. And they come aboard as Lieutenant Sutton. He came up and said, I'm Lieutenant Sutton with the U.S. Coast Guard and I got my orders. And I said, and what are they, sir? He said, my orders are to leave you alone. So we proceeded into Mobile to the greatest welcome that anybody could ever get.
This made national headlines. They were keeping
Yeah,
track of your every movement.
We were on Tom Brokaw. He really put us in the limelight. And newspapers all over the country. I've got clippings from Syracuse, New York, Los Angeles, California, of course Rockford, Ottawa, Mobile, just about everybody. ABC had us on their .com. So once we got the publicity, and that happened in Gibraltar, that's when the Coast Guard and the State Department got out of our way.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we had to slow up. It was an hour ahead of time. I slowed up and we went by that girl at the convention center at 10:30 on Wednesday morning. And gentlemen, that's my story on that part of it. And I'm sticking to it. That's a very brief story. Since then, we've recommissioned, we really put the ship back together. It's practically new. We spent over $2 million of actual dollars in shipyards. Been in there 3 times.
Donations?
Well, donations, and we make money. But we've also had $1 million probably in donations and just work that's been donated.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone out to, first time we got it going in 2003. And we went to 9 cities on the Mississippi and Ohio.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
72 days, we made $80,000. We had about 80,000 people come aboard in those places. That put us in the green because we were really never had any money. Then we went up that fall after I got back. I got encephalitis. Spent 10 days in the University of Iowa Hospital, and they told Lois I was going to be a vegetable probably.
Long nap.
One of the questions was that they wanted me to do is count backwards by 7 from 100. That's not so hard to do when you figure it out, because you subtract 10 and add 3 all the way down the line. But when I was doing that for them, they decided maybe I wasn't going to be a vegetable. I think I've had some loss, pretty minor, and maybe it's just old age. Then in 2004, I got run over by the XT-190, which was just a really.
That was a tractor.
Just a dumb.
I just
Probably
heard about
only-
that, I didn't know that.
I'm probably the only guy around that's got run over by a tractor still around to talk about it.
Yeah.
It ran all the way over me, caught my left leg, because I was trying to get back in it to get up and stop it. And it caught my back left leg, and it was come up with my right. And when the wheel got a hold of my left foot, I couldn't get away. And basically just run up my leg and come right across my shoulder right here.
Mm.
So I was about 14 days in a coma, induced mostly. But then only 7 days when I got out of the coma and I was home. So I come out of that pretty good. And then,
How long did it take you to recover from that totally?
well, it took a while just to walk because it's surprising to me how weak you get when you are in a coma laying in bed for 14
Yeah.
days.
Right.
I mean, I had these gals tell me I had to walk the hall to get in the room out of intensive care. I said, get me out of here, I'll show you I can walk. They got me out, and each of them got under an arm, and I said, I don't need you to. I took 3 steps, the sweat was coming off of me, and I was getting weak and faint. And I says, girls, put me back in bed, because I'm going down. And they kind of grabbed me and put me over in a chair for a little bit. But then pretty soon I was up and ready to go again, and that's about, maybe got 4 steps, so that was kind of how it went. They put me back in bed for a while then,
Boy.
yeah, it's not the thing to do, I don't recommend it.
Well, we don't want to cut you off here on the tape.
Well, that pretty much brings you up to date.
Yeah.
The ship was very successful, we had 40,000 people come aboard this last September in just 2 towns, Decatur, Alabama, and Chattanooga, Tennessee.
When's your next engagement with the ship?
Well, it won't be till next year, and they're gonna go back up the Ohio to Pittsburgh with it.
Okay. Wow.
I am retiring. I'm got a change of command ceremony Saturday, this coming Saturday.
Oh, that's what you're busy with.
And I'm off the board by 3 years. I was president of 2008, and I gave up the presidency, but I stayed on as a director and captain. And then I'm off as a director. We're gonna get our lives back, we hope. But the ship has $1 million now to the good.
Oh, that's great.
And it's like new, so, and I got a pretty good board, I think, and.
So Mobile, Alabama's its home now?
Yes, we'll be there 10 years in 2015. They built pretty near a $3 million dock for it. It's not in the best location, but everything else is perfect. We don't pay docking fees. We paid $160 a day down in Mobile. That hurts. So the docking's free, electricity's free, and that was $2,000 a month. It's gone up to about $3,000 now with the higher 10-hour electric bill.
Mm-hmm.
Evansville's paying them. But we bring 15,000 people into Evansville every year, and it should bring more.